What's going on, everyone? This Lakers roster is ridiculous. They have everything. They got size, they have defense, they have more shooting now. They have the two stars in LeBron James and Anthony Davis. They have the borderline potential all-star level players and Rui Hachimura, Austin Reeves, and D'Angelo Russell. I'm not saying that they will be all-stars, but they are guys that I truly believe could put up all-star numbers on any given night. And this roster, only thing that they need is to build that chemistry, build that camaraderie, build that understanding and that direction for a championship. Right? You have so much size. The smallest player on the roster is Gabe Vincent at 6'3". Everyone else is 6'5" and above, and you have so much switchability, so much versatility, so many different lineups and sets that you can run. You can go big, you can go small, you can go big small, like where teams run that small ball lineup. Well, you can make a big version of that, right? And have like LeBron play point if you need to, and then go like Taurean Prince, Jared Vanderbilt, Rui Hachimura, and Cam Reddish or something like that, right? Or even just go Austin Reeves. It's beautiful what this roster has. And much like the 2020 roster that won the NBA championship, you had LeBron James and a bunch of really good role players and a roster that was relatively deep. And in my opinion, this roster is even deeper than that, right? I think this roster is definitely bigger than that roster was outside of the center position. Obviously, they had JaVale McGee, and they had Dwight Howard. Lakers got Jackson Hayes, and they are currently working on trying to bring in another center, whoever that is. And that's all you really need. You just need that other center. Go get that other center. There's your 14th spot, and you got a very good, very talented roster. If Anthony Davis can play anything close to bubble Anthony Davis, nobody's beating this Lakers team, right? I'm not saying he will, right? And I still believe the Lakers can absolutely win a championship. But if we get that 2020 version of Anthony Davis with this roster, you're not beating this roster in a 7-game series. I don't care. Maybe this ages like poor milk. But again, Anthony Davis has to play to that level. But if he plays to that level and someone beats them, I will be genuinely surprised. But let's say we get the center. Insert your favorite center, whoever it is. Christian Wood, Bismack Biyombo, Dwight Howard, Hassan Whiteside. I'm kind of in the camp of Hassan Whiteside, DeMarcus Cousins, whomever. You'd still have one roster spot. You still want to have the three, Summer League two-way players, right? So you had your Summer League standouts and Colin Castleton and Demoy Hodge. Cole Schwider, we'll see if they end up keeping him on a two-way or not, or what they end up doing with him. But the Lakers have options. And the Lakers could absolutely bring in, we'll just use Bismack Biyombo for an example. So they bring in Biz. You got that 15th roster spot. You want the 3 two-way contracts. Okay, let's bring in a Colin Castleton, right? Or a Demoy Hodge, who many people have fallen in love with after seeing him. Really reminds me of KCP. And that'd be great. And there's a real argument for both Colin Castleton and Demoy Hodge, right? Hodge, out of all the positions on the Lakers roster, you can make an argument outside of the center position. The 2 guard is the other one. But it's not like they are completely lacked of that. You got Austin Reeves. You have D'Lo, who could play the 2. You have Taurean Prince, who could play the 2 with his size. Cam Reddish has played the 2 at times. You could even do Gabe Vincent at times at the 2, although he'd be a little undersized at the 2, but not by much. Still 6'3". Most 2 guards are, in the 6'5" to 6'6" range anyway. So the Lakers have the flexibility. They have those options. But one of the big things that this roster is missing that the 2020 roster had that was very effective, that many people don't give this guy credit for, and that was Jared Dudley, right? Jared Dudley was very important for that Lakers roster. And yes, he didn't play much. He didn't do much in the terms of like contributions on the basketball court, but what he did as a veteran presence, as a locker room guy, as a helpful development guy, right? A guy that was working with our young guys. He was working with the Kyle Kuzmas, right? That was very important and very significant in that 2020 run. He an extension of the coach in many ways. He was a guy that was talking in the locker room, that was in players' ears, that was, just leading by example. And that is so important when you were talking about that kind of roster. And that roster was much older than this roster. The average age of this roster is like 26 years old, 27 years old, and you have a bunch of kids. But you also have a bunch of young wing type players that the Lakers want to grow and develop, right? You have Rui Hachimura, you have Cam Reddish, you have Maxwell Lewis, you have Jared Vanderbilt, right? All of these guys need that veteran presence. And the only real vet the Lakers have is LeBron James. Now, Anthony Davis is a vet, right? He's 30, but he's not, that Jared Dudley age where it's like, I've been there, I've done that, I've been through the grind of the playoffs, I've been one of the best players on a roster or a key contributor or, a just blue chip role guy or, a guy that was great off the bench, this, that, and the other, right? Like, that goes a long way, especially for younger players, because you have somebody that is an example. You have somebody that has the understanding and sees it from the player's perspective, that sees it from the player's side. And so I want to run a player that was recently waived by you all. And I think that there is a real argument for the Lakers to sign this player, and not so much necessarily for him to play, but he still has the ability to play. I've seen a lot of people mention this. A lot of people talk about him and wanting him on the roster, but as more of like, oh, hey, he would be a great player. I look more at him as like the Jared Dudley role, but he can very well just step in to that, hey, I can play, let's go, let's do it type role. And that is Rudy Gay. So Rudy Gay was recently waived, and I really like the idea of him in our 15th roster spot. Obviously, it'd probably be a non-guaranteed deal because let's say somebody significant ends up getting bought out and you want to end up grabbing him, then you want to be in a position to where you can. So having a guy like Rudy Gay on a non-guaranteed deal, that gives you the flexibility to buy him out. Now, some people might be thinking of this immediately and going, no, I'd rather have a Colin Castleton. I'd rather have a Hodge, right? And look, I completely get it. But couple things. All teams need veteran leadership. There has never been a team that has won an NBA championship that hasn't had some form of veteran leadership. I mean, even the Denver Nuggets had guys that were veteran leaders. Jeff Green was one of those guys, was a locker room guy, was a vocal guy, was an important figure and voice in that locker room. That's why people think that Denver is really going to take a hit with the loss of him, because he was that vocal leader. He was somebody that was important. Even guys like KCP with his experience and him having won a championship prior and stuff like that. Now, Rudy Gay could be our Jared Dudley type guy, but the difference is the guy can still play. He's a guy that could still be a contributor if need be in a pinch. But he's also a forward that has been there and done that. Now, again, you may be saying, but I'd rather go the young route. We got these young guys, and I get that. But what happens if somebody significant does become available? Who do you waive to acquire that player? Right? Are you waiving Hodge? And now you're going to run the risk of losing him entirely? Are you waiving one of the other guys? You waiving like a Cam Reddish or something like that? Why? When you could just leave the two-way guys as the two-way guys. They can still play. They can still come up on any given night, right? I mean, there's criteria. They can only play X amount of games, but still, they can come in and play X amount of games on any given night. They're not going to get huge, significant roles regardless. And you don't have to run the risk of like being in a bind where you either have to let a prime chip go, or you end up having to waive somebody you don't want to waive. So bringing in a guy like Rudy Gay, I think could be very beneficial. He's a guy that if you need him to play, he can play. He's a guy that can still, in small doses, defend. He's got good size. He plays the perimeter. And he's a guy that could really help the Rui Hachimuras, the Jared Vanderbilts, right? The Cam Reddishes of the world. He's a similar build, similar size. He was a guy that has been to the playoffs, that has been in just tough matchups and Western Conference Finals and stuff like that. He was he was a huge component of like the grit and grind Grizzlies for a while, and just a guy that was an absolute bucket getter, right? A two-way player. Like Rudy Gay was in his prime a very good player, right? And I think that he's a guy that could really set an example for a lot of these young guys and play that Jared Dudley role. Now, is he willing to accept that? That's the real question. Is he willing to come in and say, you know what, like I'd more than happy be a Laker. You know, hey, some nights you're not going to play. Some nights you will play. Some nights, you might play 30 minutes. Some nights you might play 10 minutes or not at all, right? If he's willing to come in and kind of accept that role on a vet minimum, have a chance to win an NBA championship, kind of be a mentor for these young guys. And like I said, like Jared Dudley, be an extension of the coach, be a player that can be in the young guys' ear, then I absolutely think the Lakers should bring in Rudy Gay. There were people that wanted the Lakers to get Rudy Gay in the Utah trade. And there was a real argument for it. I didn't want him to be the main component because at one point Utah was trying to make, Rudy Gay like one of the main trade pieces. If he was like an add-on, sure. And look, I get now it's like, okay, well, you have Cam Reddish, you have Rui Hachimura, you have Jared Vanderbilt, you have LeBron James, right? You have Taurean Prince, right? You have Maxwell Lewis, you have plenty of guys on the perimeter, right? The last thing we need is another 6'8" guy. But if you get the center position locked up, you can't have too many 6'8" guys. Not just that, but he's a guy, again, with experience, he's a guy that if the game's on the line in the playoffs and, say whoever, Rui's a little shaky this game and it's like, man, we got a big moment, you can put him in and you know that he's going to deliver. He's a guy that's not going to try to play out of his element or do too much or try to be a hero or anything like that. He's a guy that I really think can set an example on and off the basketball court. It's just, does he believe that it's time to move into that role? Right? Like one of the reasons Jared Dudley wanted to do it is because he wanted to transition into being a coach. And he got that, right? He got that opportunity. Not a head coach, but he was picked up, brought in as a coach, and now he's, in the development department and all that stuff. So you could have Rudy Gay kind of follow that same suit. Even if he doesn't necessarily want to be a coach, all we need him is willing to kind of be a mentor for these young perimeter guys, right? And especially a guy like Rudy Gay. LeBron can be that, right? Because, again, he's another 6'8" guy, plays a perimeter wing like them. But there is a big, massive difference between LeBron James and Rudy Gay. There is a big, massive difference between one of the greatest, if not the greatest players ever, and Rudy Gay, who was very good, but he wasn't he wasn't a top 5 guy or anything like that, right? Like this is a guy that was very good, was a very valuable piece on many occasions, but is more adequate at the moment in relation to a Jared Vanderbilt or Rui Hachimura, Maxwell Lewis, guys like that, right? Because it's hard to relate to a LeBron James. Rui Hachimura could become 10 times better than he is right now and still would not have the success and be as good of the player that LeBron James is. But he could be as good, if not better, than prime Rudy Gay. And for those that are like, oh, he probably is already, but you need to go back and look at prime Rudy Gay. Rudy Gay was nice in his heyday. So again, it's the relatability. It's if you have somebody that you have that colleague, right, or that friend that's on an even plane to you, that gives you the advice or talks to you about something, you tend to listen to that more because you can relate to that. Hey man, I've been in this situation, I'm in the same boat you were in, this is how this goes, right? Where if you're listening to somebody else where it's like you just you've never had these experiences. Like LeBron's never had to worry about falling out of the rotation or working on a part of his game. He was the chosen one coming into the game, right? Coming into the league. He was the king from day one, right? All of that. It's really hard for a role guy, a young role guy that's trying to become an all-star level player. Rudy Gay was that guy. That is more relatable. This is what you need to do to get here. I really like the idea of Rudy Gay and that Jared Dudley role. But those are my thoughts and opinions. And as always, I pass the question on to you. Let me know yours down in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you think, yeah, makes a lot of sense? Bring Rudy Gay in and that like Jared Dudley role. Do you think, no, leave it, go get another center or whatever? However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below.